just do some icebreaker questions, just to so you get used to the microphone.
All right.
And we get into the conversation. Coffee or tea?
Beer.
Beer.
I love coffee. I love coffee. Yeah.
Honesty. There's the other attribute.
You got a Snapple over there, and
I wasn't sure if I could bring beer in here, but
I contemplated it, but let's just not get Brett in trouble.
We're after hours.
Yeah,
we can find that out afterwards.
Yeah.
Yes. Listen, we can figure that out later. What's your go-to prayer?
Probably something like, "Oh Lord," and that is about it. I imagine you're asking something a little bit more like what.
No, that's good enough.
That's what I say more than anything else. Is just, "Oh Lord."
Oh Lord.
Yeah.
That in and of itself is like a call to Him to.
I hope it is that and not something else. But
right.
Yeah, maybe my favorite prayer is actually just as short. It's just "Come, Holy Spirit." Mm-hmm. I have found that to be remarkably. He answers that prayer every time that I make it.
Nice.
Yeah,
I like that. A saint that you would like to have a drink with?
Saint Augustine probably is my intellectual and emotional guide. I think that I've learned more about how to love God from him than anyone else. I don't know if he would drink, but I would love just to be with him.
Yeah.
And listen to him.
Yeah. Awesome. Last one. Does pineapple belong on pizza?
Pineapple doesn't belong anywhere on earth.
Oh my goodness.
Are you allergic, Brett?
No, it's just brutally terrible.
You haven't had good pineapple.
I've had it in Hawaii, which I would guess is where it's good.
I would think so.
But I don't like it. No.
Let alone
it makes
pizza.
the lips, curl up all the time, and no. So if you want to ruin something good, that's a great way to go about doing it. I don't like ruining good things. So
there you go.
No, I wouldn't put pineapple on pizza. Do you? No judgment.
Not necessarily, no. I'll eat it if it's the only thing available. So, like, if you invite me to a pizza party,
okay,
and you're like,
yeah, I won't pick it off
there.
or anything. It's not like if I buy a pizza and I get to pick my toppings, and let's say I have 10 toppings, pineapple probably won't make it. Okay, but if there's a pizza party and there's a Hawaiian pizza and everybody ate the meat and everybody ate the pepperoni and everybody ate the veggies, whoever eats that one, I'll probably have a Hawaiian versus a
gluten-free.
veggie.
Oh,
okay,
yeah, because at least it has meat, ham, pineapple.
So meat and fruit tops vegetables.
For sure. Okay. Every time.
Okay.
I mean, tomato is technically a fruit.
That's
so,
right.
Well,
we can get in all sorts of rabbit holes. But anyways, for whoever is tuning in, we always end up talking about food in the podcast.
I think we should do a food podcast.
We should do a food
with
podcast.
a side of Catholicism.
Yeah. It's like
this is essentially what this is.
Yeah, it's so unfortunate that drinking with the saints is already a thing.
Yeah.
We're just gonna do and then there's pints with Aquinas, so that leaves us I don't know, shots with someone.
Shots with someone that has the name that runs with shots. I don't know.
Well, it's a work in progress.
Good.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was listening to Christopher West, I think, and he made a really big deal that eating is fundamental to the faith. Where do we find our fall taking place? What action?
Eating.
It's eating. Mm-hmm. Where do we find our salvation at church?
Eating.
It's in eating.
Yeah.
And so there's an interesting consummation of something that he was pointing out with eating that has to do with our fall and our redemption.
Interesting.
And you guys should explore that. I don't know what all that means, but there's something to it.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
we joked about, during the pandemic, like I really got into baking sourdough and all sorts of things, and that's why I'm like 30 pounds overweight now. I'm still working on my pandemic 30. But I joked that I was going to make a book, Baking with the Saints, for feast days. There's some feast days that have a particular, like, treat, baked good, associated with it, like St. Ambrose or St. Lucy. They have a specific things that you can make to celebrate those feast days. But it's still a work in progress as well. Mm-hmm. We should take it up. But
we should crowdfund it.
We should crowdfund it.
Give us money so Walter can.
I don't know why. It's money for like time. We'll take your money. Buy us a coffee. Go to buymeacoffee.com/barbatus. You can buy us a coffee. You can buy Brett a coffee. For those that don't know you, Brett, can you give us like a who's Brett Gilfillan in a nutshell?
Well, you've got my name. I'm 40-something. Grew up in a wonderful Protestant home. My father's a evangelical minister. Taught me to love Jesus and love the Bible, and I still have those two things deeply in my heart. Married a Catholic, thought that it would work out to maintain Protestantism and Catholicism within the home, and if I had chosen to stay that, it would have been pretty miserable. But thanks be to God. Working actually in a prison, I came to see the truth of the Catholic Church, and so he moved me where he is. I've been in education, I guess, for 15 years. More importantly than that, I'm a husband and a father of 2 kids, Augustine and Cosette. They are, I don't know how old they are. You'll edit that.
You got the names right.
So I got their names right.
Father.
13 and 9, maybe.
Yeah. Sounds about right. That's the age they look. So I guess
perfect.
Let's go with that.
That's what we're going to go with. I do know them, even if I don't know their age.
That's fine.
And
that's fine.
They're great kids. I work at St. Joan of Arc and have done that only for a couple of months now. A couple things. The pandemic certainly made teaching and education pretty rough. I don't know that I made things more helpful for myself either, but I was just in a position where I couldn't keep my eyes on anything, and wanted desperately to have my eyes on Christ. And thank God a position opened here where I get to be silent far more than I was in the classroom. I get to hear Jesus a little bit more. I get to be with people whose profession is to give sacraments to people, and my job is to preach the gospel. So it's amazing.
That's awesome.
That sounds like
it is
like a really good job to have. Can we touch on your conversion a little bit, on how it came about, and that I didn't know that you worked in a prison. That sounds like an amazing story right then and there.
So my wife would say that I have a tendency to not exaggerate, but overdevelop some details. It was a prison. It was a juvenile correctional facility for kids who, if they had been 18 when they committed the crimes they did commit, would have been, adjudicated to the Department of Justice or a state pen. But since they were juveniles, they, were put into a correctional facility. They were housed. So I taught at the high school there, which had kids as young as 13 up to 21. Mm-hmm. Which is not a great environment for a 13-year-old to be in the same sleeping quarters as a 21-year-old. I mean, just radically different levels of development, and the amount of sin that they had been exposed to was just terrifying. One of the requirements for parole for certain individuals was to go through an anti-gang process. So they would take a class and they had to publicly renounce their gang life, which is a pretty dangerous thing to do if they were to take it seriously. And I was at a speech by one of these students, and he was publicly renouncing his gang life. And I remember thinking to myself, why are we buying this? It was just obvious as night and day to me that he was lying, or that he had no intention of following through with any of the things that he was mandated by the state to say. And I just kind of looked around in despair, and it really was a hurtful moment in my heart, because I saw that he knew how to get out, and he was doing what he needed to do to get out, and he was in an institution who I thought was organized and constructed to help him get out safely. And I wasn't convinced of that. So I was talking to the treatment manager afterwards, and she just walked me through the innumerable problems that kids who are in gangs and how they can't get out if they don't want to. And so the position of a facility is not to change them, but simply to keep them from committing a crime for long enough so that they can get them out and have a bed for the next person who more recently committed a crime. So, good effort, but not the finances, not the personnel, not the infrastructure to actually help children, which is what they are, have their lives reformed. And as I came to understand what gang life looked like in, Northeast Portland, Oregon, it just became very clear to me that the institution into which they were born, the family, was not in a position to do them any good. The institution that the government was, that, intended to do some good, was unable to for a myriad of reasons. But what also struck me was that there needed to be an institution to help these people. That yes, it could be one-on-one, but there are resources that an individual who was in a gang needed that were beyond any one person to provide. Yeah. And it just struck me one day on my drive home, I want to be Catholic. And I never had that thought. I never had that desire. And as I've kind of mined back, why did I have that desire then? I think that it was the Lord kind of showing me that there is such an institution that exists for broken people, just like that. That if the church has not just the financial and psychological infrastructure to help someone, but far more importantly than that, the sacraments that are physical means by which people can have their life changed. And I don't know how philosophically or theologically sound all of that is, but that's how the Lord brought me to the church, that there are broken people whose families, whose state, whose even their, the only people loyal to them are people who are willing to murder for them. Yeah. And boy, that's, everybody is yearning for community, and that's the community that will just send them to hell. Wow. So they need a community who will bring them to heaven. Yeah. And whether the church does it or not, that's on me as a member of the church, but the church is designed by Christ to do that.
Yeah, I think I've heard, I don't remember right now if it was a book or something, when you're trying to replace someone from a community where it's not leading them towards the right path, let's say, when you give an alternative, you need to give them a community where they can be accepted and welcome within the what am I trying to say? Within the appropriate behavior that is accepted by the community that you are joining, basically. So replacing, like, I will kill for you with I will pray for you, and the moral life and all these other things that our faith teaches. Because if you don't have something to take the place of what you are removing that you had in the other, even though it wasn't good, it's not going to stick, right? Someone smarter than me said that, so I didn't come to that thought on my own. I just want to say that.
I think Jesus says something similar to that when he's talking about the light that is our eye, right? Like, it's easy to think, okay, I've got a bad habit that's in the dark for me, right? I don't replace that by more darkness. And, if someone's in a gang, if someone's in sin, you don't get out of that with a different institution or a different model that is just a different type of vacuum or a different type of darkness, right? Or the same. But light has to be brought into it. And just as I think absolutely saying, it has to be filled, right? So if you're taking away someone's habits or community, what you fill it with has to be like what the light does to the darkness. Right. Just eradicate it and fill.
You're replacing vice with virtue, basically. And how long had been married to your wife when you came to this realization?
Oh gosh, maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then you went through RCIA and all that.
I went through RCIA twice, and it didn't.
You failed the first time, or what?
Well, that might be the way of saying it.
Did you get like? Did you get like set back or?
I was a fighting Protestant man. I love and still love the Bible, and didn't see the Catholic Church in the Bible. So
kidding.
I went to RCIA, and they were wonderful, and I think I was respectful, but I was, just pushing. I don't care what the church says. I care what the Bible says, and they were wonderful. I didn't believe it. So the second time, the priest just met with me individually, and it was a incredibly low key. And it wasn't RCIA. I was a Christian. So it was just making sure that I knew what the church taught so that I could profess the faith.
Got it.
So was it explained to you what, like, sola scriptura, like, was it one of those Catholic answered debates, or like sola scriptura is not in the Bible kind of situation?
That I when I was told that, it just didn't make sense to me, though. Like, what else is there? I still saw the argument that the Bible came from the church kind of as a circular argument.
Okay.
And I couldn't get out that it was what I've later just seen differently, right? That Jesus gives us the church gives us scripture. I was comfortable, I suppose, with believing that the Bible fell out of the sky. R.C. Sproul, who is a really respected Protestant theologian, just says the best we can do as Protestants is agree that it is what does he say? A divinely inspired but fallible collection of books. Like he, from his history, he couldn't perfectly say that the collection of books was infallibly put together, but just that the books themselves were inerrant.
Interesting.
That's very interesting. Never heard that.
Yeah.
But that makes sense why so many people stay on the side of Protestantism. It can be like a big hurdle for a lot of people, right? But we're glad to have you on the team, and I've had a lot of good conversations with Brett about the Bible, and now I understand why. I always thought that you were a cradle Catholic. But it's so nice to know a little bit more of your background. Well, our parish has a magazine that is brand new, and the issue from October. You wrote an article on Jesus as a teacher. Is this a topic that you studied already before writing this article?
I think yes and no, not officially. I think it was just something that as a teacher, and one thing, I went to an evangelical school, and what they taught us in the teacher school was you're going to be the most effective teacher if you pray for your students. And so what I learned to do was, after class was done, was to sit in the chairs in which my students sat and prayed for them, and to even just look at where they saw things from the class. So, yeah, I think something like that helped train my mind towards that question of what Jesus is like as the teacher. But it wasn't something that I wrote it because Deacon Andy said, "Hey, Brett, you're writing something." So, okay, what is it going to be? And I think I've been doing some work with the parables, and something really interesting Jesus says, they ask him, "Why do you speak in parables?" Well, because, and I'm paraphrasing, some people aren't going to understand, and some people are. And I thought to myself, as a teacher, why would you speak in such a way that some people won't understand? And I think that it has to do with, it's understanding, but it's also that some people won't accept him. And that kind of helped me understand, what is it that Jesus is teaching? It's not something outside of himself. It's him. It's him revealing himself through his pedagogy, through his art of teaching. And so if people are going to reject him, of course they're going to reject what he teaches.
Yeah.
even if they don't realize that what he's teaching is himself. I think that's Matthew 13. Yeah.
So Catholic, I don't. It doesn't get old to make that joke. I should probably pick up my Bible more, but okay. I really like what you say about a teacher being a master pointer, so the student can do the learning when it's directed in the right direction. Because a lot of times I find myself as a father that I just want to give my kids the answer instead of like pointing them and directing them so they can do the learning themselves. Granted, my oldest is 6, so it also talks about how much patience I have with my children. But regardless of that, do you have any like tips or tricks on how to resist that temptation to save our kids the strife of figuring things out?
Let me put it back to you. When you're asking your kids a question and hoping for the answer, why do you want them to have the answer? Or what are you hoping for with the question?
Well, it just came about recently that we're doing the Baltimore Catechism for homeschooling. So it's a lot of memorizing, but sometimes when we do new questions, they have some idea. And so today I was asking them, what is sin? Definition of sin. And it took a little while to be like, okay, well, it's when we disobey the law of God. So it took a while to peel the onion on those concepts, because to do it age appropriate, I was like, how do I do this? So I guess when I ask them, I want them to comprehend a concept that I'm trying to get them to know, to introduce them to. The faith in particular is a little bit tricky because, we have a lot of things that are a mystery in and of itself.
Very abstract. Perhaps.
Very abstract, yeah. Like the Trinity and stuff like that we have done, but
hence the parables, right?
Hence the parables,
right.
Yeah. So I guess in that way, and also I guess because I am an engineer, I'm very straightforward. It's like very rational for me to say, this is how you pose the question. There are some hints in the question, but my kids most times default to answering God, because most times that could be a partial valid answer. Or they just have like wild guesses, which is very fun, but it's not productive. So I guess that's what I would say. What am I looking for when I'm trying to ask my kids questions, expecting an answer?
I think at one level, and I'm really glad that you kind of brought up that your children are young, right? So what you're pointing at is something different than what you'll point at when they're 16. And so right now, a definition of sin is good, right? And if they can repeat that without totally understanding it, as maybe they shouldn't totally understand it, they're not at the age of reason. But if they can say what it is, right, that's really good. I think to hope that, and I don't think that you're doing this, but to hope that they would have tremendous sorrow and contempt for their sins right now, that's something you want to point them to. And you point that to, you show them by going to confession, by bringing them to confession. That's how you point that as they get older.
Yeah.
But you don't start with a trigonometry proof, right? for a 6-year-old, you just start with, well, what are the numbers? What are the definitions? And I think as they start to grasp what pointing looks like, then maybe another way of saying it, right? This may not be helpful. If I point, there's 2 things you might be tempted to look at. One is my finger, and the other is what my finger is pointing to. And I think especially younger children or those who aren't used to being pointed, like the dog almost, the dog will sniff our finger when we point.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't know that we're directing its gaze towards something else. And so I don't think it's a problem that a 6-year-old won't see along with your finger yet. But, I mean, as we teach our kids through our lives, as we point them to Christ and how we live, they'll start to look with us, towards Christ. And then the little points that we make along the way, age appropriate. I can define a sin. I can define a sacrament. I can define a doctrine of the church. And then as I see my dad, worship Jesus Christ and receive the sacraments, the fullness of the point comes into play.
And I think also learning is about repetition. It's about constancy. Because we don't learn math from just seeing it explained once. It takes. That's what I like about homeschooling, at least the curriculum that we're following, is that they do the same thing every year. They have history for the first year, and then the following year they have the same history, but it's age adjusted. But they go through the same thing, the same periods for 3 years straight. Same with I don't know, English or the faith, So it's like always being reintroduced, but as their brain develops, they can capture more, so more is given. And the repetition of it, even when they're kids, when they're the young kids, that they're not, like you said, at the age of reason, to become familiar with that language is better than, okay, you're 15 now, you should know what sin is.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, I don't get it. Or I don't want to get it because I have no interest in it because this is not the way I live.
Yeah.
So
just as you're describing that, I just thought to myself, what a magnificent teacher the church is. I mean, she does the exact same thing in the liturgy, right? I mean, we get in year A, B, and C the same readings, but again and again and again. And what is the same every single Sunday is the Mass. So she continually is just pointing in the same way towards Jesus every single day. Yeah,
that's beautiful.
Yeah, what you said about when a kid looks at their parents, sometimes it's not us pointing, but it's just our actions are being observed. Every time that we do anything, the kids are like sponges, right? So sometimes I find my kids doing the thing that I don't like about my personality when they like talk to their siblings in a way that I'm like, okay, that's definitely something that they have heard me say that I need to correct. So our actions are also pointing at whether it's something positive or negative. They're gonna pick it up because mom and dad do that. So that's like what I've been battling with lately, that I'm like, okay, I need to do a better job at this as a role as a father, as a teacher, being an icon of Christ in the home, in the family life.
And that's where the humility comes in.
Oh boy,
right? Both with your kids and with yourself, to say, I can't be this example. I should be better. I need to be better. And coming back to the pointing thing, because I have the same type of issue when it comes to just telling my kids an answer sometimes. And I think we share that type of pragmatic look at things, because you just want efficiency at some point. Like, this is what it is, and this is why. But by doing that, I think you hinder their thirst for figuring things out too. You giving them some answer to some problem helps you out because you feel that you've given them the answer. It just something will click. It'll click when they figure it out, and they can't figure it out if we're always giving them the answers. Which with my youngest, my eldest learned to read really early, She was very young when she learned to read. Not going to say that she did it by herself, right? I mean, we obviously did things that promoted this love of reading that she still to the day has. But when my little one was starting to come to that same stage, obviously we were judging her with the standard of the first one, right? Mm-hmm. Well, she did it. You must be able to do it too. We've done exactly the same things with you. But obviously they're different. And we thought it was going to take like more work, and it did. But when it clicked, you saw it. It was visible when it clicked. That she started putting like the letters together in the sentences and everything. It was amazing to witness. I had never seen anything like that in my life. So patience, I think, is another thing that we need to practice as parents. You know, I'm assuming as a teacher, you would have to have oodles of it because you have the answer. You're trying to have the student figure it out.
The tension, you know, for the teacher is, do I want them to have the answer, or do I want them to be able to discover the answer?
Exactly.
Because if the teacher's job is just to give the answer, I don't know that I'm doing anything good for them that a dictionary couldn't do. But if I teach them a process, if I teach them a virtue like patience, working through frustrating problems, you know, your daughter is frustrated by reading but sticks with it, is, I mean, that's every bit as valuable as what she's learning.
Yep, totally.
I think on the teaching side, what was really humbling to realize is that I would assume because I've taught something, they learned it. And, you know, you ask the question, if they didn't learn, have I taught? And that kind of plays with you after a little bit. Well, of course I taught, I gave the answers. Or of course I taught, I was speaking for 45 minutes. But if they haven't learned, I don't know that I've taught anything or not. And it's a live question. I don't know the answer to it. But what I do know is that the purpose of my teaching is for them to learn. So if I've taught poorly, I need to teach better. If they didn't learn, I need to teach in such a way that they will see it, which I think is kind of the beautiful thing of pointing, right?
Yeah.
At some point, I'm sorry, there's nothing else to do but just to be silent and point at the bloody thing that you want them to see. And then, you know, they say it wrong. Okay, they say it wrong. Just shake your head, keep pointing. And there's that persistence. Okay, eventually that they'll get there. And okay, now call to mind, how did you get there? How do you know what you did before was wrong? And help work them through the myriad of mistakes so that the next time, it still might be onerous, but it's a little bit easier. Yeah. And so maybe that's why, you know, Jesus, you know, these parables, he says that really mysterious thing too. He who has ears, let him hear. Who has eyes, let him see. Well, don't we all have ears? Apparently not. Do we have ears to hear what he is telling us? Which does mean some digging, some humility, just like what you brought up before. You know, I mean, are we going to be humble and listen to Christ? And I mean, that's who he says he came for: the sick, people who need his grace. Yeah. If I think I've got it, then I don't have anything to learn from him.
Yeah, definitely. Man, that's a lot to unpack right then and there. What you wrote about Jesus being pointing to himself because he is the fulfillment of the law and the prophets. That resonated with me because of what you talk about, the curious student that is looking for something, and that something is God. Because in part of my coming back to the church, that I took a detour through high school and college, it was an intellectual conversion, so to speak. It had to make sense rationally for me, and then the heart followed. So I think that there's a lot of value in people that are seeking and people that are pointing those who are seeking. But what do you do when there's people that don't like how to think or don't know how to think. And some people might say that everybody's a philosopher, but not everybody asks the important questions of why we are here, where do we come from, where are we going. In your experience in education, have you had chances to kind of be a philosopher with your students to help them think of all of these, I want to call them transcendental questions?
Well, I mean, one of the blessings of being a teacher is that you have to spend at least an hour every single day with kids. And so they can't help and you can't help but get to know one another. And if Christ is at the center of my life, though I won't say it in a public school, that should come through. And it certainly comes through with the students for whom Christ is at the center of their life. I'm sorry, I think I was catching two streams of thought of what you were just saying. One was for those who aren't curious.
Right.
And those for, as a teacher, just how I...
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, okay, there's going to be people, I guess it's a twofold question. For those that are seeking that you can help them, point them to God, and for those who are not, how do you get them to think? Or how do you get someone to start thinking or learn how to think?
One of the things that I mentioned earlier about St. Augustine is that, he taught me how to think in a lot of ways, but I think I was more than that. I think I learned how to love from him. And one of the things he talks about is, not necessarily a question for the lethally intellectual person, but I think it goes to everyone. If you had all the material goods that you ever wanted, food, pleasure, anything you wanted, and you had that for eternity with no hope of ever losing it, would you be satisfied? And right, I mean, you shake your head. Walter says, well, maybe, but no. But I mean, he asks it, and he answers by saying, we wouldn't. And I think that for the lethally rational person who doesn't want to believe in God, that Augustine's argument from desire undermines some intellectual defenses that people have, because it's not so much about what I know or believe, but it's about something that is radically unsatisfying about the world in which I live. And even if it were as good as I could possibly imagine, with no hope of it ever going away, let me say that differently, with no possibility of it ever going away, I would still be unsatisfied. But why is it the case that the material world is so unsatisfying, even if we had it for forever? Well, there must be something non-material about us that is yearning for a satisfaction. So that's one way of thinking about your question, is that people who aren't curious, ask them the question that you are made curious by, or you think that they would be made curious by. And if it's someone who's desperately an intellectual, I don't know, maybe there's something to undermining that, because we're not just pure intellects, we are bodies and wills too. And to help them see the fullness of themselves is a way to help them see, I think, the fullness of God.
Nice. I like it.
And do you think that there's an issue right now with kids being introspective? And because I believe that everything is very on the surface with kids. Talking about the pleasures, like the dopamine that, I don't know, cell phone gives them, or sex gives them, or whatever. Whatever one of those pleasures that you were talking about that they can have eternally, well, they have it right now, basically. They don't want for anything in terms of how our culture is moving. But how does that translate into the society? Because we're just seeing vast amounts of depression and suicide amongst teens and amongst like young people.
And substance abuse.
Substance abuse, because they need to fill it with something. So it's very bad that it's not being reinforced to be able to think, to be able to be introspective. Because they don't let them be introspective in school, right? It's like if you see somebody like, correct me if I'm wrong, but typically they see that kid as a weird kid that is like, okay, you're not paying attention. Like, no, I'm like thinking. Allow me to think, because I'm figuring things out in my brain, even though you think I'm not paying attention. I don't know what my question was.
No, I think that's really important, that there's an absence of silence in our adolescence, but I don't fault them for that. I think that it's the parents. It's our generation's fault that we've distracted ourselves to oblivion. One of the really interesting things, when I was teaching in the prison, they frequently were more interested in something that was going on in their lives than what I happened to be presenting on in the day. And if I were just at my rope's end and I needed a break, I would put some music on. And the Platonic idea that music will tame the wild beast. And it helped some. It kept them from behaving radically inappropriately. And then I read somewhere that Satan hates sacred music. So instead of Bach, I put on Gregorian chant. And it created the loudest silence that I've just ever experienced. And one kid said, "Why are you playing Christian music?" "Because we need it." And that was all he said. But
he knew it was Christian.
Oh, he knew it was. Yeah, I never even thought about that. He did know. That's interesting. But I wonder too. I don't know how to fix the world. All I can do is fix.
That's what we're here for, Brett.
Well, you got the wrong person. What I would recommend is in my own home, create silence. My best thinking is just when I'm walking, right? I'm not listening to anything. The mind can wander. What a healthy thing that is. And if children don't have that, if they're just getting dopamine kicks all the time, what happens when they don't get that? That they have to race for something more dire, a higher dose.
Higher hit.
Yeah.
Bigger hit. My 5-year-old is now craving to retreat and be alone, away from his siblings. And I'm like, good luck, buddy boy. Now you know how I feel. It's like we might have a monk vocation in the home.
Are you an introvert?
I don't know. I think I would say that I'm an extrovert because I can talk to people. But the more I'm close to 40 now, and I think now I'm a homebody, and sometimes I get energized when I am in a social setting, but sometimes I feel very drained afterwards.
Yeah, same.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
It depends on the day.
Fair enough. That might be the case for more people than the labels would allow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But still, it's a fine balance, right? Because you don't want to be like a curmudgeon that are only like at home, not having healthy relationships with others, versus someone who just has superficial relationships with everybody. It's a fine balance, I would say.
It is.
Yeah. That's a whole other podcast episode.
I'm working. I'm not working. I'm taking classes at the Kino Institute right now, and we were looking at Genesis 1 and 2 this morning, and the Spirit of God is mentioned twice, at least twice, and the Hebrew word is breath, and that's what spirit means. And one of the Trinitarian formulas is things are in the what does it go? It's through the Spirit, right? Or in, what's the preposition? I'm so sorry, I can't remember.
I don't know what you were referring to.
Oh, shoot. I'd have to look at it.
Like in the rite of baptism? Or
Maybe. Or I'm stumbling here. I'm so sorry. The idea is that, Christ is the Word of God. And when I say a word, I'm also breathing the word out.
Okay.
And so the Spirit is the breath, but Christ is the Word. So there's this beautiful pairing of the two, as as they come or interact with the Father. And I was just thinking about that in light of the idea of silence. If I can hear my own breath, then maybe I'm participating in something silent. And I suppose that's important because that's how God, He forms us out of clay and He breathes into our nostrils. This is a tangent that isn't nearly as clear as I was anticipating it or hoping what it would be.
We have a lot of that in that podcast.
Oh,
It's
good,
okay.
good.
It's all good. Last question, I would say, to put a bow on it. Is there something that we haven't talked about that you would like the people who are listening to know? Related to the...
How do we put a bow on that? I'm going to just fill some dead air here. I don't know.
Read Augustine.
Augustine's great. Be silent. And adoration's the best place for that. I need to tell myself that more frequently.
Okay, quick question, quick follow-up on adoration. Do you just sit in silence, or do you read, or what do you do in your holy hour?
A mix of things.
Okay.
I love St. Teresa of Calcutta. She talks about, when she's in adoration, she just looks at Christ and wants to be looked at by Him. And I try and do that sometimes. My wife, when she's there, she just copies down the gospel. And I love that because she's actually listening to the words of Christ as she's adoring Him. That's beautiful. I don't read very well in front of the Blessed Sacrament. I do prefer my own thoughts or trying to just look at Christ.
Nice.
I can't be with my own thoughts.
No.
I'll just wonder. I'm training myself to be more silent in that way because I need crutches. I need the rosary, not to call the rosary a crutch. I hope that doesn't come off as a heresy or something. But I need a tangible thing to keep me focused, or a book. But when I come into adoration and I don't have any of those things, I do find myself wondering about the day, or about what's happening next, or what we're gonna feed the kids, or what's happening this weekend. But then I have to force myself to come back. It's like, okay, sorry, I'm here.
That's okay. You
listen.
You come
I'm
back.
listening.
Yeah. I think one of the weirdest things that I've done is my holy hour is just me, and it's very early in the morning. One time I took the St. Michael hymnal and I just started singing hymns, and somebody was entering the chapel while I was finishing one of the stanzas, and I felt so ashamed. I felt a lot of shame. I was like, oh, I shouldn't be singing. But maybe they should have joined in or listened. I don't know. Just drop a comment. Tell us if you sing in front of the Blessed Sacrament or not. Might be a good expression. I don't know. Maybe. Yeah. Even if you don't sing well, pray that God gives you a voice for singing. That's a priest in Mexico said that. So there you go. And that who sings prays twice.
There you go.
St. Augustine. That's right.
All right. Well, Brett, thank you so much for your time. This has been a wonderful conversation, and may God bless you and your family and your ministry. And thank you for taking the time to talking to us.
Yeah, for sure.
Wonderful being with you guys. We'll get a beer sometime soon.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Good.
And for everybody else, go to direct.me/Barbatus for more information on the podcast, and we will see you next week. Until the next time.
Bye.